Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Probando Fuerza, the official podcast of Pulseo TV. My name is Manolo Sanchez, the face of arm wrestling in Puerto Rico and Latin America. Tonight's show, it's a very special one to me. I've had very few heroes in the sport of arm wrestling, and I've I think I've got them all in this show to tell the story. Some are very popular. Some are not a lot of people know about them because you have to be like a really hardcore fan to know about this or about them. Tonight, I have a very special guest, a very talented arm wrestler in his time, a legend of the sport, one of my heroes in arm wrestling, Mr. Vern Martel.
Hey, thank you very much, Sheriff, for having me on, and very kind words from you. Appreciate that.
So I know you had a nickname, the One Arm Bandit, right?
You got her. Yes, I was in a serious motorcycle accident and lost the use of my left arm, which forced me to compete with just one arm only at the table. Got the nickname One Arm Bandit.
Yeah, and I was thinking about doing this show for a long, long time, and I think I reached out to you a while back, and I know I remember you answered me, but we didn't agree on anything, and I think you just had an interview recently about your story, but that's what I want. I want you to tell your story about how you got into arm wrestling, your series of accidents, because you didn't have just one accident, right? You have a
Mhm.
series of accidents in your life, and even having all those let's say situations or series of unfortunate events, you kept pulling, and you're still here, and you are the man, like you are the legend. So my first question to you is, how did you got into the sport of arm wrestling?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was just something that I think a lot of us fall into with learning that we got a lot of power in our upper body, and we've gone to parties, hang out with friends, or done other sports where it led to arm wrestling, fooling around with arm wrestling, right? And everything I tried, I was always arm wrestling. And a group of my friends knew that there's a tournament that was here in my own hometown, and they went and said, you should really go. And I mean, back then, 77, I mean, you had no amateur classes or anything like that. You were right in there with the open classes. So here I was in there at 14 years old, going against older guys all above me in that, and the only thing was that I was able to get into that 154-pound class, which regulated at least the size, anyways. And it really all started from there. I just fell in love with it. I instantly met Keith Koenig, who used to run all the Canadian wrestling championships here up in Canada. And he just got me on board with, you know, going to all the different types of tournaments, and it just kind of escalated from there. I just fell in love with the sport, and I tried traveling and going to all these events just so that I could start being part of this sport.
So you started at 14 years old
14 years old, yes.
against bigger and older guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, back then there was no choice, right? There wasn't even a left
Yeah.
arm competition at that time. It wasn't until a few years later and it opened up and it was only two divisions. And then it finally opened up to three divisions. And so it was neat seeing all the different transitions actually from the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, even now with the transitions on the table and different types of pockets, openings, pin pads, pinning, strings, even lights and everything else. It was, the old style of wrist wrestling, everything was, it was nice to kind of go through that whole era of arm wrestling. And be a part of it and learn all those different things throughout those different periods.
That was the golden era of arm wrestling. That was when real arm wrestling happened.
Yeah, yeah. Like I know if you talk to a few of the guys from back in the sport, I mean, many of us probably want to almost go back to the old style of Bruce wrestling because there was no, I watched a podcast with you talking to John, and he brought up that where there was no flashing anymore. It was like it was a strong man event. Like you gripped up. There was no running away with it, like getting away from a fast hit or anything else like that. Uh, Elbow, they're a little more lenient on elbows and everything else, but you stayed down, and it was just a straight strength and endurance polling that it definitely it definitely went and showed who was a little stronger in the actual technique and skill and leverage that all played into it is pretty amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with you, and I agree with John when I was talking to him because when I started arm wrestling, I started at a really young age. I started at 16, and when I
Mm-hmm.
started, uh, there was still that old style of arm wrestling. That's how I started arm wrestling, and I liked it better than the arm wrestling there is now. But everything evolves, and we
Yeah,
have to like accommodate to whatever happens in the things we like. But
yeah,
having said that, you mentioned before the accident you had that you lost the use of your left arm. Can you tell us that story?
yeah. That was it's kind of like a prime of life. He is 25 years old, uh, getting ready to do a lot of different things. Come off a big win down in Costa Rica for my first WAF World Championship that I won. And at that time, I think everybody's well aware the movie Over the Top was in the progress right around that time period in '85. And so I was training hard for that. I was getting ready to be an underwater welder. And I just happened to be heading to work on a motorcycle and went up around a corner, and a guy that was in a vehicle just started cutting the corner. And like when I first glanced up, I was like, okay, everything's good. And then I was checking because I was going up around a corner where I was positioned on the road. And when I looked again, now he was on my side. And unfortunately, my reaction time wasn't as fast as it should have been. I mean, a lot goes through your mind in that split second, but I was trying to bring my bike back up because I was already leaning going around the corner to try and jump over him, like physically jump off my bike and go over the vehicle. But it just slammed. It caught the front of my tire and just slammed me and the bike down, and we twirled underneath the car. The front wheel running over my left arm and head, and then the left wheel or the back rear wheel went around over my hip and femur. And yeah, it was quite an ordeal that really I was going to say I wasn't ready for, but nobody's ever ready for something that devastating, to deal with in their life. And it was life changing because I mean, it was, you're so used to being able bodied and doing everything with two hands and arms. And now it's restricted to one. And it just took a lot of different stuff away from me from many other sports that I used to play and do to even thinking about the challenge of trying to arm wrestle at that time because it was unheard of. I knew nobody that arm wrestled with one arm at the table, right? And it was like back then actually they even had to change the ruling because you're aware that you got to put your opposite hang on to you with your opposite arm while you're pulling with the arm that you're pulling with, right? And that was a ruling. I had to touch that, and I couldn't. I physically couldn't. And so they actually went in and they changed that ruling that if you were physically incapable of hanging on to that post, then you didn't have to. But in any other circumstance, you had to hang on. You have to hang on to that post. So a lot of changes that for myself and even the sport developed with me.
Yeah. And if you don't mind me asking, what was the diagnosis of why you lost the use of your left arm?
For sure. So you got five nerves that come out of your spine that go down to either side of your arm. It went and separated a lot of stuff in my what's called a brachial plexus area of your arm that comes down your neck and into your front part of your chest. So it actually ripped the nerves, and I had 72 breaks throughout my whole left arm. So they went in there and wired the whole bone together, put metal rods, screws trying to hang, keep it all together. They pulled quite a large vein out of my left leg to put in there to keep the blood flowing. And then later on, they actually pulled nerves out of the back of my calves to put into my brachial to try and see if they could hook anything up, which they hooked something up that allowed me to do a little bit of lifting up at my side, but not enough I can't reach out, I can't grab anything, I can't. It's, yeah, it's no use at all at the table. So there's no advantage for me to.
So I remember watching you and becoming a follower of
Mm.
you in competitions, and every footage I mean, I wasn't following you because I was watching the sport while you were competing, like in whatever competition. Uh, I started becoming a fan and following you when this social media stuff starting spreading. Not social media. I know there were videotapes that you could buy and stuff like that, and CDs and DVDs and stuff like that that had tournaments and stuff. And I remember I liked the way you pulled, and I was like, is he just using his right arm? I always was curious until I saw that really you didn't have the use of your left arm, and I became a even a bigger fan because even though you had that against you, you kept going and you were really good uh, at arm wrestling with one arm, or even if you had two of the use of your left arm, you were above uh, a lot of the guys. Uh, I was wondering how many times did you get to be world champion?
I ended up between arm wrestling and wrist wrestling because I ended up doing both with 13 world titles. So it
13
was,
world titles.
yeah. So one WAF world title prior to my accident, and then 12 more following it. In between WAF and wrist wrestling. So going to Petaluma in the Las Vegas when it transitioned from wrist wrestling in Petaluma, went into Reno, Vegas, Boomtown, and then the WAF ones down in Springfield and Thunder Bay and stuff like that, winning there. So it was, I just tried to be as active as I could. I mean, it was a personal challenge to try and fit into a sport and not be really recognized for having a disability. I just wanted people to like, okay, there's a guy going up there pulling with another guy. And it wasn't really until, like you said, people actually seen me and they saw, how come that guy's not hanging on, that they really realized that I was just pulling with one arm. And it was, at that time too, it opened up quite a bit for kind of like para polling, like physically challenged classes as well, which I got involved in, and it was actually very weird. This is a weird take on it because I would compete in that, and one in Moscow, one at the Worlds in the class, and a lot of people would go, well, yeah, but you won physically challenged class, like that's not the same as like an open class. And I'm like, okay, so first off, I am physically challenged, and then anybody who ever did beat me, they never ever said, yeah, I beat a physically challenged guy in the open class. They never would respond to me that way. It was always, yeah, I beat Vern Martel, or I beat the one-armed bandit. It was never, I beat this guy with a physical disability. And yet, whenever I go into a physically challenged class, then I thought, well, I was too good to go into a physically challenged class. And it was like, what do you mean? Like, I am physically challenged, and it is a choice that I can go in on limited use, just like a lot of the other people were in the physically challenged class. And tough guys in that class. Like, if people ever jumped in, like I used to say, you arm wrestle me, and I have a physical disability, and I'm beating you. Uh, there's guys that I was fighting with. I had a harder time in the physical challenge class than I did in the open class. That's how strong they are. They adapt to different skills, use different strengths. But it was very interesting how people would look at it, like, oh yeah, you won a world title, but it was in, physically challenged class. It wasn't until I actually would win it in, a fully able-bodied class that they're like, oh, okay, you won a world title. So it it's just something that's very weird. But like I said, in the same scenario, if they pulled against me in an open tournament, they never ever said they lost to a physically challenged guy. They just said, "Oh, I lost to the one-armed bandit or Vern Martel," because of the status that I kind of earned competing in different larger events.
Yeah, and that was something I was always wondering about. If there was a pre-accident arm wrestling career and after the accident arm wrestling career, and I see that there was, right, and you were world champion before your accident, right?
Correct. And actually, what people don't know is the guys that I trained with back in that time where the opened up, started the Iron Arms Club. My left arm was actually my stronger arm. So I lost the use of that, and I had to build up my right arm to to bring it to a level that I could actually compete against, like a lot of big names out there, and be very efficient at it. And so, but a lot of people, when I talk to the guys from back then in the 70s, 80s, they're like, man, I wonder how many people realize that your left arm was much more dominant than your right. And a lot of things that people don't know too is during that time of adapting to the table with right arm, with working with just one arm, took a lot of core strength, working with a lot of different leverage, hand movements, and techniques, changing my technique, and it took a lot to adapt to that, to build up enough pressure that I could actually be a worthy opponent for people who are pulling with two arms, and especially being able to take somebody's hit when somebody's snapping so hard. And there you are, you kind of got your arm out there, but you're not braced anymore across your chest to catch anything. It was just you had to absorb it all with one arm. And so it surprised a lot of people, really surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, it's actually a disadvantage, because when you're holding to the peg, you can, if you're hitting or you're going forward, you can pull yourself, and if you're defending, you can hold your body with your other hand. So you were at a disadvantage, and even having that against you, you were the very top tier of the guys on your weight division, and even over, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I met a lot of interesting people, and through the sport, I lost to some key people like Roman and Ingen. Ingen said a very interesting thing to me, and even Roman did that. Vern, if we would have had to compete against you with two arms, we probably would have lost. So that made me happy inside, knowing that they recognized how hard and my efforts were, but also how much resistance and that I could give them with just one arm. But throughout North America and stuff like that, I did very, very well. And there's a while there that I dominated the sport in North America as far as being a 154-pound guy and showing up at tournaments. It was kind of like when you show up at tournaments, you just start picking out the guys that who you have to chase or beat in that weight division. And there was, there's a few years there where as soon as I'd show up, then it was like, okay, that, you just made the tournament that much more tougher and stuff like that. And so, so it was, it was a nice reputation to work my way up to and get that acknowledgement from people.
Yeah, and we see all those trophies standing right there behind you because you had a long career. How long was your career competing, like actively competing? How many years?
Good 33 years very active doing it. And then it's been almost 44 years altogether, because I still fool around with the guys all the time. And the guys go off to tournaments and they do very, very well. But myself, I just don't feel like I'm like the guy I was before. I've been through cancer, stage 4 cancer, and kidney disease. Almost lost my life with fighting COVID and stuff like that. So each time I've kind of risen and then I've been pulled back and try and rise again and pull back. And um, it's almost like arm wrestling though is kind of toughened me up against being resistant against a lot of stuff. Um, because I had to develop that at the table. Even when I first started, was like, you know, um, I was used to competing with two arms, and the guys that I'd pull against, I got to be quite good beating them. Won the Canadian Championships, went out to Costa Rica, won there, and then to start all over again after that 2 years of being getting out of a wheelchair and working with my arm and plastic surgery and stuff like that, nerve transplants, and then trying to adapt to the table. I took so many losses, and it was actually hurting me. You can get beat, and it was just tearing me up. So it took a lot of work, and if it wasn't for a pure love for the sport, I probably would have dropped it. But there was something inside that just you got to keep going. And this is the only thing that's going to pull you forward, get you out of this. Because I was in dark places during that time, right? That it pulled me out of those and give me something to strive for and work towards. And and once I started getting on that kind of roller coaster ride, then it just, so many highs, lows, and highs again. Um, it was incredible, like quite an incredible experience. Like it was just, I did things beyond what I thought I could do. Actually,
Yeah, I want people that watches this podcast or hears it to understand that this man has been through a lot in his personal life, and arm wrestling motivated him and kept him fighting and kept him going and helping him with the mental situation of going through all this stuff because he has mentioned he went through cancer. I know you went through cancer. I know you went through kidney disease, and I believe it wasn't long ago you were in a coma, right?
yeah, yeah, I was put into a coma for over a week. My body just started shutting down. So many things were shutting down that they said we have to put him into a coma, else we'll lose him. We have to start working at one thing on a time. But if we were to deal with everything all at once, that I wouldn't have made it through it. And when I went through that, again, with everything where you're stuck in a hospital for a while and you're stuck in a bed, and I was tied down, I strapped down, everything. Again, once again, you just start losing a lot of muscle, the atrophy that you fight with every experience like that, whether it was my accident or cancer or the kidneys or the COVID. Like it just was, I build up and then be tore back down, build back up, tear back down. But, you know, great experiences. And along the way, I've been so happy to see other people get involved that have had physical disabilities and stuff like that. And I can even remember actually with John Brzenk when we were in Chehalis and we were down there pulling. That's when he had his big match, and he actually let Devin Lorette actually go inside. He decided, I'll just try and beat you at your own game, even though he top rolled him before and made it easy. We're in Chehalis, and it was just after Bob Brown got his accident with riding with John. And we were sitting in his motorhome, and he was talking to me about, he's having a tough time relating to Bob. He didn't know what to say, or he just felt really bad about the whole scenario and everything. And he was just asking me, like, Vern, what's the best thing I can do? And it's just like, John, you just got to be his friend. Be his friend, be supportive, treat him like nothing has happened. The more that you can, like, just treat him like nothing happened. Don't go and grab everything for him. Make him do the stuff himself. Let him feel like he's still a person and that he hasn't been robbed of things just because of his accident. And then it was great because I sat with when John was like, like that's good, good scenario to think about and talk to him. And then it was in Boomtown that I talked to Bob Brown and his wife about it, the ordeal, and that talked him through all the different things that he was going through mentally, physically, and just having a really tough time, and related my story and how I went through things and how I was, became capable at the table and everything else. And like you said, he said it was life changing for him. So, just my experiences of what I went through is something that other people with, mental or physical disabilities can actually can actually take it in a little easier, or have a better understanding, or yeah, it just gives them a sense of direction where you don't think you had any direction while you're in going through that. And look at Bob now, like look at what Bob's doing now. Um, but yeah, I mean, who would have known a guy way up here with, using one arm was able to get in there and, pull with the big guys, got to hang out with guys like that, Bob Brown and Travis and all that. And, here I am way up in Canada, about as far north as you can get. But it just took me to all these places. It is amazing, Stand on the stage with Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Winning the Arnolds a couple of times. Like, it was, people were pretty amazed at it. And I guess it inspired people along the way, which was great.
Yeah, you inspire me because, like I said, ever since I found who you were, I've always been following you, and through all your things you've gone through, you've overcome everything, and you're still here fighting, And I always remember there was this tournament. I don't remember which tournament it was, but at the end, I know Ron Bath was there and Matt Gertner was there. I think even Travis was there. And I remember that after the tournament was over, they kind of did like a king of the table with Ron Bath,
Oh
and
yes,
everybody was going and going and going. Even Matt Gertner was losing, and the only guy that could hold Ron was you.
and you know what's funny about that tournament? That was like a West Coast. I think it was a John Bergeson tournament, and I'd gone in a couple of classes where I had Devin Bear and everything that I had to go against Simon, and but I won my class, and we were waiting for the overalls to happen on that. And I'm standing beside John, and John goes and says, we were just talking, and John goes, says, yeah, Ron come over and asked me, he says, what guy do I got to worry about here when I pull him in the overall? And I said, oh yeah. And he says, I told him it's you. And I said, oh, John, why would you do that? And now I'm scared because Ron's going to be up there just ready to fire on me, right? But yeah, I got to pull him twice in there, and then yeah, then Ron went and said that afterwards. He said, "Yeah, John told me you were the guy that I had to try and beat." So, I mean, that was good recognition, from John to
Yeah.
we were in Chehalis and we were pulling and, we were doing some after pulling. And I was like, man, John, we've never hooked up. We've never pulled before. And so we went and set up at the table and went to pull. And I mean, I just started pulling back. He started pulling back. And I could just feel, okay, well, I can take John. And I just stopped. It wasn't a matter of like, okay, I'm just going to pull over John because I can right now, because he did too much pulling. And I just looked at him. I said, John, you did way too much pulling. This isn't even fair. But, I wasn't somebody that was going to take his arm, know that I had more power than him at that moment and flash him over. It was just enough to pull, and we both looked at each other, and it was a nod. Like, and ever since then, he just went and thought I was a strong, one of the 54-pound guy to watch out for. And so it was good. I really enjoyed getting that respect, and from a guy that I consider the greatest of all time in the sport, and a true gentleman in the sport, and technician, and even Travis Badgett, me being a one-armed guy, he used to call me the gatekeeper. He once says, "You're the gatekeeper. You're the guy that everybody's got to beat to get to the next plateau and challenge. Be ready for guys like Ingen and Roman." So it, here's a couple top guys that would just say, Vern, you're right here. This is what we think of you. It was to get that kind of respect was almost better than winning a lot of the trophies, right, from your peers that you admire.
Yeah, and the thing is, people don't realize, maybe this younger generation don't realize that in those old tournaments and in that footage where you see John and Travis and all these big names, these legends participating and competing, Vern Martel was there too, right beside them, competing and winning the same way they were doing. Uh, this is why Vern is one of my favorites. He's a legend of the sport, and I wanted to know of all your achievements in the sport, of all your world titles, national championships, state championships, which is the more like the most special to you, the one that you remember and you say this is like the 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 one that means more than the others.
Mm-hmm. I think it would, I had a lot of really special moments, like I always think Moscow, the Golden Bear, was phenomenal because, when I won there, I got a huge standing ovation from the crowd. It was amazing. But as far as a tournament would have been at the Arnolds, when I went to the Arnolds, and we had just a very stacked class. And I got to pull guys, like Gabe Accardi and Simon and Devin and that, and a number of other guys that were all in that class. And I ended up winning, and it was just a phenomenal feeling that this is one of the top tournaments that a lot of people try to, qualify and go to this tournament. But now I'm in the top tier of this class of all these top names that have all do sensational across all the country, right? Um, that was probably one of my biggest one, and then it was great because I got recognized by Arnold Schwarzenegger for my efforts. He recognized that that I competed with a disability, which at that time was him and Marie Shriver when he was still going up. Marie Shriver, or married to her, and they used to do a lot of work with physically challenged games, promoting those on Los Angeles. And so he recognized that, and he just was like, I can't believe that you're competing, with able-bodied people and with your physical disability. So that was pretty good. And then afterwards, got to go down and Sylvester Stallone, who I never got to go into the movie Over the Top, even though I got the forums there from Canon Pictures at that time. And I could watch everybody else, that I sit there and just watch everybody that I knew at that time. And it was almost like 2 decades later that I finally got to meet Sylvester Stallone, and he was at his Stallone in-stone product that he used to sell at that time, set up. And he went and said to me, he says, "Oh, I remember watching when I was with Arnold, because I guess they were up in the top booth watching down on the stage." And he says, "I know what it took to arm wrestle." He said, "I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like with one arm." So that was probably my peak, like just best sensation ever.
Of all the matches you've had in your life, which was the most you remember, the toughest match you had?
Um, I keep thinking of Devin Bear. I've one guy up here in Canada who we travel together all the time. Myself, Anthony Delantonio, and Dave Hicks. Dave Hicks was a big heavy hitter in the 154s. And when we first met, um, I beat him out the first time, and he was like, he couldn't understand it. It was one armed guy beating him. After that, he beat me out several tournaments. And then finally, I was able to beat him out. But that was in Canada here. And then down in the States, it was always, no matter where I seemed to go, Devin Bear showed up. And we had the most brutal matches all the time. Long matches that he was so equally compared to me in strength, his ability, his techniques, his hand strength, everything that um, we were just in set up for long matches. Like just it was just so minute little moves that would happen, and I'd always be leaning on his wrist and everything else, and he'd be drawing on my lower bicep, just pulling and pulling. That was probably some of the best matches, and I mean it's great to see him still. I mean he just won another world title, right? With along with his daughter. So I mean he's just a great guy, and we were always, as soon as we went into a tournament, caught each other's eye, we just knew, okay, well, I'll see you at the end of the tournament because it's going to be you and me. So
So that was my next question. Who would you be, like your nemesis, like your toughest opponent? And you said Devin Barrett, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was great. I mean, I had lots. As I was moving through the different years of arm wrestling, I always looked at different people, like who I wanted to be like. And I mean, John was always at the top. Alan Fisher was always down my weight class, and even at that tournament that you're talking to, where Ron Bath, um, Alan Fisher had just come back out. He'd been off on a layout, and he just started back up once. Remember when Betsy and Savon were doing all the pulling John? They were putting together the show for Paul and John, and Betsy and Savon were out there filming at all these events. And Alan finally come back out, which I was happy to see him after all the years. And it was funny because he would come over and he wanted to set up with me and kept trying to do different things, and I would just keep holding him, and he would just shake his head. He says, I can't even understand how you're doing that, given that much strength with just one arm. And so all the way through, and he's been a great friend all the way through too, offering lots of prayers whenever I'd see him and come down and see everybody. you know it was great to see everybody, especially after I got out of the cancer clinic when I only thought I had 4 to 6 months to live. And then I went to Vancouver for a year and went through the treatment and everything. And then it was I made a promise with my friend Dave Hicks that if I made it out of the cancer clinic, we were going to go to the wall tournament down in Vegas and not compete, but just be there to watch it, be a part of it all. And we went down there, and sure enough, it was like all the guys that I remember in the years prior were all there, and it was so good to just stand and talk with them and see them. And of course, I got tons of hugs because everybody was like, we thought you were gone, Bert. Like we didn't think you were going to pull through. So um, just true admiration. And it's weird when I hear people go and say, "Oh, you're a legend," like because I think of all these other people that are, to me, are legends because of what they proved over and over and over and over again all through time. Yeah, I maybe became a legend because of being probably the only one arm guy out there during that time. Now I see that there's a couple other guys as well. But during that time, I never ever ran into anybody else that I ever had to, get matched up against somebody else using just one arm. So it was very, very different. It was a very special time for me in the growth of arm wrestling at that time. So it was pretty amazing.
But I want to say that you became a legend because of how good you were at arm wrestling, and to see or know that you were only a one arm wrestler, it made you even greater because you were really, really, really good at arm wrestling. And anybody that arm wrestles know that you gotta have technique and you had to have strategies and all that. And to be able to do that with just one arm, it 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 makes you even greater that you already were because of your ability. Because to me, you're a legend because of how good you are or were at arm wrestling and how many world titles and championships you won. And at the time that it that we could say like it was prime John Bersenk was going around, Ron Bath prime, like at that those years, I to me it's my opinion that in those years the competition was even tougher because we have a prime John Bersenk, a prime Ron Bath, a prime Travis Bacon. All the guys were in the prime, Engin Terzi on his prime, you know, and you hung around all those guys. You pulled all those guys, and you stood your ground. They didn't run over you. That was what made you great. The that you are a one arm wrestler. Okay, it's a plus, but we gotta see the things how of the reality of the time you were around. With the quality of arm wrestlers that that were around you in your weight category over you, and even the rules, the set of rules and everything, it was different. It was tougher. You know. So, having said that, what do you think about the sport nowadays of what it has become?
You know what? I still follow it because I still train guys to try and get out there, and probably been watching one guy, Alex Maritz, who's been doing stuff from our club here, right? And I started training him 20 years ago, and it's great to see him now that he's moving and I'm telling him, okay, you got to get out to these sports. Like nobody's gonna come to your backyard. But I love what Ingen's doing with the East versus West and stuff like that. I still see what Denise Waddles is still doing down there as far as putting on a lot of tournaments throughout North America there, down there. Frank and Karen Bean doing the same. You know, it's it's kind of fallen back into that same area where everybody used to discriminate about which is a true worlds as far as was wrist wrestling world championships, so true worlds, or was WAF, right? And it all depended on which area you were from. When I first started, World Wrist Wrestling was the place to go. It was first, and it's to win a World Wrist Wrestling Championship. Now you see the IFA and the WAF again with the split and stuff like that, with going on, and people arguing what's the true worlds. But with all that going on, I don't think there's any better time for people to get into the sport because of how fast you can learn by what's on through media and videos and everything else. You can study your opponent before you're even pulling them. You get to learn from all the top different people who post different things and show their moves. So it's a whole different era as far as back when I used to just get an envelope with a stamp on it that showed me the competitions, half would be over by the time I'd even open the envelope up, to the Northeast board that everybody started communicating on, to Gary Roberts when he got initiated the RMTV and everything else. So people started seeing videos. then of course the phones all come out. So the evolution of arm wrestling is just each time it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And you have Devon and stuff like that, Levon, all everything that they're doing in Dubai, what it's doing over in Turkey. Um, big things, big things are happening. It's drawing a bigger base of fans that are watching it and seeing it and stuff like that. And so I think it's been super great for the sport. That's where I'm at. I keep following it. I keep following it, and when I look back at events, I still think back when I was at my peak and stuff like that. It was still some of the biggest events that you had. You couldn't. You just showed up at an event and ended up seeing everybody that was there. There was always a surprise. Not that you were like a champion made on through media or through your posts and everything else that, I'm best, I'll take out so and so, I'll beat, you had to prove yourself. You literally had to go to an event and prove yourself. There was no bashing people, everything else. I think the first time I really ever seen it really come out was when Travis started it all with the boisterous voice, the voice of arm wrestling type thing back then. Nobody was used to that. Like, this guy's making so much noise, like, I'm too strong, like just bringing his opponents down. And then you started seeing everybody else. Okay, to make this sport happen, everybody else has got to become almost like a WWF wrestler, where they got to get bigger and they got to get more excited and more, you know, making the comments and that like that. So it's good to see. Sometimes it's a little bit too much intimidation when I'm watching somebody being put down. Like, they're there to arm wrestle. They've reached their peak. You're at their peak, and you're just going against them. But I can see why you have to do it. Why you have to be that way to create the excitement to get not only those that watch arm wrestling, but bring in a whole new audience to arm wrestling to see it.
Yeah, that's actually what Devin Larratt has achieved. Like, uh, Devin wasn't always like that. He changed and starting being the way he is now, and he's like selling the product of arm wrestling, and arm wrestling is big now, but it's not big like there are like 100 times more arm wrestlers. No, there are 100 times more fans that just watch the sport, and
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
I think that's Devin's biggest achievement on what he does. Being the influencer on that. And I wanted to ask you your opinion on that on the Devin thing.
Yeah, I think he's doing great things. Like I said, at no period of time in the sport has anybody ever had as many, influence as many people as what Devin has done. And it's been through his strategies. I almost think it's because of what he went through in the military. It's funny, I was just going through some videos, and myself and Dave Hicks were one of the first referees at one of Devin's very first tournaments way back in '95. And so I'll be posting those shortly, actually, with Devin when he's a young guy. Very timid guy at the table, not making a lot of sound, just listening to the referees and pulling, right? To, when I used to see him and we used to pull when he was in Canada and he'd come out west and we'd pull against each other. And, then I seen him go up through the weight classes, and, he brings attention to the sport, just like Travis did during pulling John. Whenever John would walk through, the Travis, I remember being in Vegas, walking through the casinos with Travis, and he's like, yeah, I'm that guy, I'm just too strong. Like, it was just, you know, uh, for me, I'm not that type of person. So it was almost intimidating, but at the same time, um, I enjoy what they do. Sometimes it goes a little further than I'd probably ever take it, but I guess that's what you got to do in today's world to get recognition or to pull people in. to what you're doing. The crazier things you do, the more people seem to follow. So it's he's definitely on the right track. He's he's the guy who's being called on for matches, right? Everybody who thinks they're good. Devin's always your opponent that they're going to be striving for, and I'm looking forward to him going against LeBron again. Like it's I definitely think he's going up there. But right alongside that, I just love that John's back out, right? He's back out, he's accepting matches, and to him now it's not like to cheat, to win like he was. He's got nothing to prove. That's what I think. Devin still got stuff to prove. John doesn't. John did everything. He beat every monster there was in his prime time, right? And now he's still doing great, phenomenal stuff that people just like, look at that guy. Look, he's still in there with the best. Um, it'll be just interesting
A
to
guy his
see.
age and who really doesn't train.
No, and that's what that's almost like me. I'm not I was never a weightlifting guy or lifted weights. When I competed, this is what a lot of people don't realize is when I competed, it was just with arm wrestling training, just like John would say. For the simple fact that anytime I started training with weights, one side would get too much bigger than the other, and I couldn't do any growth on this side, because there's all muscle atrophy. And I didn't want to be a guy that was looked way out of proportion, like one side all built up and the other side not. So it actually restricted me. It held me back on actually being hate saving, being even greater because I could have actually been stronger, but I held myself back. I was happy with where I was. I looked presentable at the table. I didn't, people weren't, you know, noticing right away I had a disability because my proportion was right. But other people were training and stuff like that. All I did was really listen to what John said. He never trained. He would just arm wrestle. Like there's nothing that would put your arm into, make it vulnerable or put into positions that arm wrestling does that you can mimic with any other type of exercise. Now they got a lot more stuff that's it's similar, but I mean the response time and the amount of time that somebody's just instantly reacting against your arm and stuff like that, that there's nothing out there that's going to make your arm respond as fast as it does in an arm wrestle and challenge you.
Yeah. Vern, who would you say, in your opinion, it's the top 5 arm wrestlers of all time?
Of all time, um, if I said all time, right away would actually be John. John would be right up at the top. Devin, I think, is right there. I would say Gary Goodrich. Um, and then I think of another big guy, Cleve Dean, was a monster. And then I actually even think Ingen Terzi. So then I go into Bob Lobb, Aston. Like there's a lot of people that all sit right in there. But for people that achieved a lot, those guys have had so many events under their belt in big tournaments, small tournaments, and longevity.
Yeah. Uh, I remember when we lost Cleve, like the sport really lost a giant and an icon of the sport. And I agree with you in that list, that exact list. I agree with you 100%. That would be my top 5 all time because right, the new generation always thinks about Pushkar, then it's Blanco. They even putting their LeBron, and even though those guys are great, they have not achieved what the guys you just mentioned
Yeah, they got to
have.
have continual success, achieved over time. Theirs is all you can track it within a 5 to 10 year period, not years of doing it. Uh, you know, guys like me when I was young. Those are all big names that were doing lots and lots of stuff. And it wasn't just a one-time lucky. It was time and time and time after again. And I met Clete Dean when we were in Reno at the Sands for the Can-Ams in 1983. And I can remember me being at that time a 143-pound guy. And I just gripped up with him. And it was just like, that's all I remember. It just felt like a great big baseball mitt fitting around my hand. And I just looked at my forearm and looked through it, and all I could see was his forearm in each side of my arm. And I was just like, oh man, I don't know how, guys like John and stuff would ever beat this guy. And so it was just amazing, like just true, yeah, marvels in sport with different people on their strengths and their abilities and what they're able to do.
What do you see in the future of arm wrestling?
In the future, I just really think that, with everything that's done online, everybody holding phones, everything else, I mean, I think it's just going to blow up. Give it 10 years, it's going to blow up even more. I truly see that with the media attention and what guys like Devin are doing, I could easily see them promoting another movie, doing another thing like Sylvester Stallone did with Over the Top when there was got into it and we had a huge boom. Well, we're almost at that boom right now that I think if somebody takes it, just like when they were, doing the whole scenario with up here we had Arm Nation, the TV series, but down there they had Game of Arms. I think it'll be something like that. Somebody will take on something and want to put money in, or you will get. All we need is somebody who has a lot of money that wants to do something and really move it, just like they did in Wall and with WAL and that's what I see. I see it keep blowing up. I think it could be more and more publicized on TV to become into a regular event that you could watch. I do think that they'll have to change up some of the ruling, and the referees will have to cut down the amount of setup time because I think that's our biggest takeaway in the sport is the amount of setup time, how long it takes to set up that a person's waiting for an actual match to happen without the pulling and foul. Like it just has to be a setup. A referee step in within 10 seconds if the people can't. And to me, I never ever had a problem. I used to just go in there, my nice little hand grip, a nice little low. Nobody ever fought it. Nobody ever thought it was ever intimidating. They got what they wanted. I had what I wanted. We were set. We worked with the referees, not made the referees work to have that match happen. We just went in there, set up perfectly, bang, it was done, it was over. So, even now I try and go through and trying to find some of my matches. Well, Gary Roberts captured quite a few of them, but they're so fast. It's like a 5-second little clip because it was in, done, boom, done. None of this like pulling and setting up, 30 seconds later getting a ref. Now we just slip out deliberately almost to get into straps, go through all it again. That's a lot for somebody to watch, especially if they're trying to understand the sport. They want to see something happen then, and then they don't want to see somebody just lose on a foul. Meanwhile, you got somebody who's pulling somebody over here, and some guy loses, or he ends up with fouls even though he's here. Or it's that's the only thing that somehow they got to improve. They're making lots of gains on the sport and making changes and everything else. But those are a few things that I think they have to kind of fix so that it becomes a lot more better for the viewing audience. Like it'd be like having a couple of boxers in the ring and they're showing you the whole time that they're wrapping their hands up in their gloves and they're
Yeah,
moping and
yeah.
spitting. Like it'd be like watching all that. Well, they just want to watch you box, right? They don't want
And
to watch.
to me, I'm exactly like you. I go to the table. I feel like I don't fight in the setup because I just go put my hand and I'm just starting to learn how to fight for the setup. because I'm in a disadvantage with guys that do that. Like they fight for the setup, trying to get everything they can get away with, and I don't do that. I'm an easygoing guy. Just put my hand and try to feel comfortable and go.
Yeah.
And but you're right. You're right. I believe it, at some point it's got to be changed to something that it's simpler for people to understand, or maybe just starting the strap, set grip strap, so it make it shorter.
Mhm.
Uh, and more people would understand and don't see it like a waste of time.
Like, I
Of
mean,
the
you
setup of
watch
the match.
the yeah, you watch the World Championships. Half the matches are won on fouls, and it's just like you're at a World Championship and you're winning. Like I don't think I ever won on fouls. Like I always wanted to have the match, like whether it was fast start or fouls. No, I want to win. I actually want to walk away from this table and say I had a match, whether my arm went down, down from the opponent, or I was able to win, not not win on a foul or on a technicality. Like that was just like I traveled all this way to win on a foul.
Yeah.
It just for me, it just didn't make sense. I love the sport too much to say that I would ever want to win that way, or to push a person's elbow off, or intentionally slip to get in straps to try and do other different things. Like it's like how fair do you want to make the sport, and how much do you want to cheat? Like is do you want to feel like you won on a cheat, or do you want to feel like you won honestly with all your training, all your effort, your exercises, continuous arm wrestling practice? That you actually went somewhere, you traveled somewhere, you felt ready, and you met an opponent that was equally matched or worthy as you were, and had an actual true match, and then leave there as a winner. I beat somebody who was as good as I was. Like,
And the sport has evolved into what it is now today. Uh, what's your opinion on this super match uh, type arm wrestling that we are watching now? Like, there's almost no tournaments anymore, and it's all super match. Did you ever had a super match? And what's your take on the super match versus tournament format?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely makes it interesting. A super match, though, I mean, you're training for one person. You're not training to meet an entire weight, everybody in your weight class, which, you know how it works with, you could beat me, but I can beat Tom over here and Tom will beat you. Like there's just things that work against each opponent that makes each different technique special, or leverage, or just your physical thinking, your rapid thinking, that make it each scenario different. But when you're training, you just train for one guy, so it makes it interesting. There's a lot of matches people want to see as a super match. um back when I think back in 2005, 2006, Travis was going to set up a tournament for the 154s and the 176s, the top 10 guys, which range right from myself right through to Ingen and Devin and Salawada and Gabe Ray Heinrichs and all that, like all big names, and we're going to have a big showdown. I like those type of things where you have more than one guy that you're competing against, because then it becomes an endurance factor, not yeah, I don't know. It's different. I love what Ingen's doing. I totally get it. But I think it's only for those that are raised to that plateau. That's all you'll ever see. What about all the guys below? When do they shine? Right? And for those guys to get up top, you need all these guys below. If there's none of these guys, who would you be? So you need to. I like the tournament format so that even if you're a top guy, you can come in. It doesn't guarantee you're going to win in a tournament, because there's too many things that will happen, right from the way that the draw sheets fall in line, who you're going against, that end up changing the overall scenario of what may happen. So both of them, I just put it that both of them have a purpose in arm wrestling, and each one of them I think is specialized. But it's super matches I think are for the guys that are more on the elite side and they want to pull high. And then you can have like at a tournament where there is a tournament, there's super matches. Those same guys can actually drop into a tournament as well to compete because they pulled the guy they wanted to, but now they can compete in the same class too. So I think it calls out a lot of people. I mean, when I was doing well, I wish I could have called out a few people to have matchups like that and had a super
Did you
match
ever
sort
had a
of.
super match at some point?
Um, Not really. There was stuff in the works that we were doing up here in Canada, uh, down in the States. Um, I remember Gary Roberts was trying to set something up as well. But at that time, too, there wasn't too many people who wanted to have a super match with me. So I don't know if it was because maybe I scared them or they thought they would just beat me too badly. But I was always game. I was totally game. I made myself available down there. I kept traveling to make myself available for anybody who wanted to, test the waters and see, if they could beat me, or I wanted to go out there and see who was in my class that would be a worthy foe and that I would take all my hard work and try and beat them. Like that was the exciting part about arm wrestling, was not thinking about one person, but thinking about many people in your weight class that, you know, make you feel like you're up top. All these guys are so special down here. And sometimes it's you're only that elite puller by only so much, right? Because your arm happened to go on this side, but was it only by what, 5% margin, 10% margin, 1% margin that you won? So all those other guys are right there. And not only that, is as much as I thought, oh, I'm pretty good, I always knew there's always going to be better. Like I was just a guy who was out there trying to do the best that I ever, best that I could and enjoy the ride and do it for myself as far as like I can still be in the sport despite my disability. And every guy that had a name that I beat was just one more little mark on my almost on my holster in a way that okay, I just beat that guy. Now who's next? Who's next? But um, no, I just arm wrestling. I don't know. I mean, you love arm wrestling. I love arm wrestling. It's something. There's something about arm wrestling that makes us have this passion for it, and it's got to be the excitement, the training, how personalized it is to you. The friendships around the world that you meet people. It's not like I'm going against you, and I don't like anything about you. We'll have our match, and then we're best friends afterwards, right? Like it's what other sport is like that, or that we'll go to the table afterwards and okay, let's feel it out. Let's I'll learn from you, you learn from me. Like who gives away their secrets like that in any other sport? It's just it's an unnatural thing that makes this sport special.
Before we end this show, the last thing I wanted to ask you or present to you is you've seen where the sport is today. We are really close to getting to the Olympics. Hopefully, in 2032, arm wrestling would be an Olympic event. Uh, you have encountered Engin Terzi and in many competitions, and you've pulled him and everything. And we all know that East versus West and that it's Engin's promotion. It's kind of leading the way on the sport. Uh, what would you say to Engin if you see him tomorrow walking around the street and you encounter him? What would you say to him if you get a chance? or you had the
Ah,
chance?
actually, it's funny because Ingen and I are good friends. Like I said, we were good enough friends to share a room in Vegas and stuff like that. We communicate with each other still through messaging each other or through different emails and stuff like that. I seen a side of Ingen that probably nobody ever seen. And while we were in at Vegas there, Ingen ended up losing to Roman and Rick Salawada, and he broke down in the room, like literally broke down. And it was at that time that I realized how much more the sport meant to Eastern Bloc countries like that. That they had their country behind them, and it meant something to win. Like here in Canada, we win, yeah, big deal. Over there, you win. I mean, it's a prestige thing. We're recognized, and Ingen broke down. He's like, "Oh man, I don't think I'll arm wrestle again. I don't think I'll go. Like, I feel shameful. I'm hanging in my head." And I'm like, "Ingen, you can't feel that way. You did your best, and by you losing, you come out a winner because you are going to be that much more better." I said, "We got to lose to know what winning is about." And then, he felt good. And I think you'll see in the podcast, there's a lot that went down right there through even Travis saying that there's hocus pocus going on at that tournament and power being pulled from one person to given to another person. Ingrid and I, we went down to a buffet and we got sick from the food and we felt awful pulling into the quarterfinals. And but there's a lot that went down there, and I've seen a whole different side of England that maybe made us closer because I saw him at his weakest moment, but I've also seen him at his strongest when he's at the table and he's you know smashing guys down and going through them all through the years. But I've seen him at a very vulnerable moment when he considered giving up the sport. So and that's
Do you
something
do
that's
you
pretty.
do you know? I've always wondered and never asked him. I had the chance, but I never asked him in the time I had him on the show. Why does he has that? I don't know if it's a nickname, but they call him the Enigma of Rage. What's the story behind that? Do you know?
If you ever pull Ingen and he gets frustrated or messed up in a situation, watch him get fired up at the table. It's like a rage that he'll destroy. Like all he's thinking about is destroying an opponent. He'll be Ingen is probably the nicest guy you'll ever pull. But if you ever mess him up or if you ever played the head games with him that people are doing now, it fires him up. Like he gets into a rage that he'll just go and then he'll walk away, he'll be storming, like just revving, and then he'll calm down. Right. So he can bring on rage fast when things are not going right or he needs to get himself fired up. But a great guy. And when you mention that, I'm actually training hard. I actually want to go into the Paralympics, so I want to be a part of that and go and compete. Um, and then from there, so that's my goal here in this next year is to compete in that. And then also I want to try and come back to arm wrestling again, just being able to compete again. But I'll probably never be an open class, but the masters classes, I'm over 60 now. And but I've been just building up my body, building up my strength, doing a lot of handing, finger conditioning, and wrist conditioning, and doing a lot of stuff. So I'm doing the baby step work so that it's going to take me to an ultimate and the goal here that I can go back and be a part of it again.
I'll That's great news for me to hear. Really,
Mm.
it will be something. It will be emotional for me to see you back on the table. Uh, you were a great arm wrestler, and to demonstrate the longevity you can have in this sport is amazing. Even going through any adversity you can encounter in life. Uh, Vern, I would like to thank you for taking this time out of your day to spend these nice conversations we have. Uh, like I said, you're my hero, one of my heroes in the sport. I admire you a lot. because of all you have achieved, even though all the adversity you have encountered in your life. I will pray for you. I pray for every athlete that it's in the sport, but I always pray for the ones I really care about, like you, John, Engin, Devin. I pray a lot. Uh, uh, and I really thank God for guys like you that are in the sport that I have grown up and become a man watching. You have helped me through adversities that I've gone through in my life by watching your videos and following your careers. Uh, and I thank you. I thank you, Vern, for for that, for what you've done in the sport, for your career, for that fire that wants you you that you want to be back on the table competing. And I really hope I get to see that again. That would be a really special day. So so I thank you for that. It motivates me for my super match next week that I have
Luke.
in Arizona.
Yeah, I see that with Luke. But yeah, no, uh, sending all the power to you right now that I
Thank
have.
you.
And,
I need
with
all the
Luke,
luck I can get.
and but I'm very touched. Thank you for your very kind words. Like I said, I always just wanted to be a part of the game, part of the sport, and I just appreciate everybody that accepted me back into the sport, and with my disadvantages, always allowed me to be a formidable competitor to them, and give me the matches that I needed so that I could take myself out of a very dark place and have so much opportunities to do great stuff. So thank you very much. Like I really appreciate
It
it.
was
Thank you for
truly
having me. So
it was truly an honor and a pleasure to have you. I hope we can do it again and talk about any results of matches or events that are in the future. I would like to call you my friend and keep in touch with you. Like I said, I admire you a lot. You're a very important person in my life as an athlete, and I've always looked up to you as I did with John Enging and all those guys. Uh, thank you for this time. Thank you for sharing the story with the fans, and I hope that everybody that sees this show watches in its entirely, because you haven't been able or given the chance to tell your story much, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been a lot of years since I've been out of the sport. So there's a lot of young people in the sport now that, Vern Martel, the one arm guy, what's that about? So that's why I keep trying to put those videos out there, keep getting people to see different views, get different people to get inspired, you know, um, and just help different people like yourself just feel inspired, uh, never feel that they can't ever attain anything because, hey, this one arm guy did it. It's possible.
Yeah. So thank you for your time.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you
gonna
very
leave
much.
you to enjoy the rest of your day. Uh, love you, Vern. Hope to see
All
you
right.
soon in the tables.
All right, right back at you. Have fun down there in Puerto Rico. Hi to everyone.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye. Yeah, you
Bye.
bet. Bye now.